So, peeps, I found this interesting middle ground video, and I thought I'd watch it. Yeah, that's that's pretty much the rundown of this. Yeah, let's just dive head first into the lava pit, shall we?
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said I want to transition into a black person and I'm redefining what blackness is to fit what I view it as, right? Would you consider that appropriation?
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing.
All right, this is like Jesus Christ, like 3 seconds in, and we already get like one of the most like dumb fuck dishonest like framings of how being trans works. Um, Here's a problem with comparing these two weird ass fucking comparing these ideas. One is a fucking dumb fuck hypothetical that makes no sense whatsoever, and the other is a recognized thing that has arguably existed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Um, Here's the difference between race and gender, right? Both of these are social constructs, but the way these social constructs works are different. All right, so when it comes to gender, gender being a social construct, I'm not talking about sex here. Sex is a bimodal distribution, but and it's fluid, but I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about the social construct. What it means to be a man and a woman, the masculinism and like femininity, um, personality traits. This bimodal system is universal and across exists all over the world. And we know these things, and we know like being masculine and being feminine is fluid, simply based on the fact that if we look at culture, different cultures, culture to culture, the ideas of what it means to be man, the ideas of what it means to be a woman will always be different. And knowing that, it tells you that gender is a fluid concept and a social construct. And even in other cultures, looking at Native Americans, for instance, there have been like I believe two other different recognized genders alongside being a man and being a woman, like being like both, like two spirit. I think a lot of it is religious. I mean, some of the different genders do have roots in a religion as well. Like I know Indian, like the third Indian gender is like rooted in religion as well. Like you're either two or none for like Native Americans, and in other cultures, we can look at pretty much anything. What we would call that non-binary now in like America, but but that just prove. I say all that to say that that gender is a social construct and it's fluid and it means whatever the fuck we want it to mean. So therefore, knowing that, coupled with the fact that sex is a bimodal distribution and is also like biologically, scientifically fluid, so can the concept of gender. So there you have it. And on the race front, it's very simple. Race it can be traced back by two things. It's often traced back by either your ethnic background, your lineage, or the land that you were born in, the country, the area in which you were born, or both. That's what defines race, and it always has been that, and always will be that. Even though that's like kind of fluid in its own way, but the way that works is often traced by blood or the culture that you were born in.
Comparing apples to oranges because race and gender identity are two separate different things.
Step forward if you agree. The transgender movement is indoctrinating our youth.
Literally every conservative steps forward.
We are
Amazing.
seeing, especially on social media, on TikTok, you're seeing a lot of people in this community really just targeting children, and you're seeing drag shows, even in conservative states like Texas, and
Jesus Christ, I can't even get like the first minute. Goddamn. As someone who is not really fond of the whole drag queen thing, it's not harmful to kids. Like not even in the slightest. We can have a conversation about like I have seen like a few instances where there were like provocative dances being done by certain drag queens. I don't know if they were I don't even know if all of those like clips were actual drag queens and more just like dancers performing. But it's weird because a lot of it's not even like one that's not even a trans thing. Like, being trans and being a drag queen, they overlap, but they're not directly tied together like that. It's just being drag and being dressing in drag and being trans is different. They're both gender non-conforming things, but they're not the exact same thing. Because the men who like dress in drag still identify as men. Trans women like will often do a lot to their bodies to fit the feminine mold. And to the kids that are there seeing that stuff, that's just irresponsible parents taking kids to things that may or may not be inappropriate. I mean, we can have a conversation about what's appropriate to show kids or not in regards to those kind of dances. Like Cardi B dances on stage. Kids and teenagers love listening to Cardi B and everything, but nobody really talks about them unless she's doing like the wet ass pussy thing. Like that phenomenon has gone on forever, but nobody really cared up until it became a whole big social issue. It's just a level of dishonesty on the conservatives' part. This whole drag queen story hour is not grooming. It they're not reading like sexual books to kids. I've never seen anything being sexual being read to a kid ever in regards to that thing. Again, drag queen story hour is not my thing, but it's whatever. So the stuff that's most damaging is like just simply inappropriate, but it's not gonna harm or quote groom kids. But Jesus.
Even just media, movies, like it seems like everything seems to be targeted at these kids. You have drag story hour for kids, and it's just really, I think, predatory in a way. And I'm not saying every trans person is doing this, but as a whole, there does seem to be a
So
route
why are
that they're
you
taking
tying
to
like
get to
that
the kids.
directly to
We
being
hear
trans then?
Blues Clues
Like
playing in the next room.
I don't know how many
and
trans
then you
people are even
hear
into that
the Gay
drag.
Parade song. It's Blues Clues. You're not expecting to be talking to the children about that. It really makes you wonder.
What's inappropriate
are they really
about
coming for the
telling
children?
And I think we see
kids that
in
gay
our
people
population
exist?
now the rate
You
of
know,
young
all
children
that
who
Blues
are
Clues thing
identifying.
was doing, in like even all these other kids' cartoons, are they're just saying that being queer, being gay or trans is valid. That's it. There's nothing sexual about that. If you think that's sexual, get your head out of the gutter, you fucking sicko.
As transgender, non-binary is skyrocketing, and I think there's something to be said for people who are truly experiencing gender dysphoria,
Oh
which we
god.
recognize
Oh
exists,
god.
and those.
Oh god. She's doing that argument. God, they're machine gunning out all the fucking dumb fuck arguments to malign the trans community. The only reason there are more trans people coming out is because it's becoming more socially acceptable. That's it. Like there are lots of probably thousands of unrecorded trans people that existed like back in like the 50s, but they never came out because they would get fucking killed. Being gay and trans was unacceptable. Hell, being a cross-dresser was illegal. Like of course they're not going to expose themselves at that time. Now that it's like perfectly legal and like slightly more socially acceptable, of course people are going to feel more comfortable coming out. Like this is not hard to figure out. This is not like more they're not factory producing gays and trans. Like please stop. This is the most dishonest argument ever. Like I even know of one there was a there's one trans woman that exists right now that's she survived World War II. Actually, there were two that survived World War II. I think World War One or two. I can't remember. But both of these trans women survived uh, World War One/2, and then they go on to identify as women. Like one of them is like alive right now and is like, God, I think she's like 90. Like she basically identified as a man pretty much her whole entire life. She was drafted into the war, she survived the war, and then after that, now she feels more comfortable now that, society has progressed. Now she feels more comfortable identifying as a woman, and she's chill now. I guarantee you there are a lot more people like her, only they never got the chance to come out in the first place because they probably likely died before like things became more socially acceptable, or they're so bogged down in like the society that they grew up in that they like it never even crossed their mind. It was never a thing that mattered to them anymore.
Who are experiencing what is now going to be called, or in the future going to be called, this social contagion gender dysphoria, where they're being exposed to it on social media or in school, or mom and dad are having a conversation about it with children, and children are now starting to develop gender confusion.
Or even babies,
You can't
right?
develop
People
gender
who are being
confusion.
born, they don't have to put the gender
I'm
on
getting so
the
sick of this confusion argument because like people who are gender non-conforming, they aren't confused. For the most part, they know what they are. The confusion part is on the parent side, because a child will say that they're non-binary, but like the parent being a dumb fuck has no idea what the fuck that means, and think non-binary means the child doesn't even know what genitals they have or whatever, and so they assume that the child is confused when the child knows exactly what they mean when they say that they're non-binary. They just have they just feel more comfortable like just identifying that way. That's it. It's just an identification. That's what they feel more comfortable identifying as. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not confusion. It's just you're the one that's confused.
birth certificate and they're saying you can choose whatever you want to be. Like, that's so dangerous. And even lying to them,
So
saying like, oh, if we put you on
dangerous.
hormone blockers at this age, it won't do anything to your puberty, it won't affect you long term. And it's just a straight up lie. And there's like an entire Reddit thread dedicated to people
Oh
who
my
transition.
god. They machine gun these arguments so much. Puberty blockers aren't harmful. They're just not. The worst that happens that I've seen is like the bone density, but that gets legitimate. It literally gets counterattacked by HRT. Like once you get hormone replacement therapy, which is most likely to happen to trans kids like who have been on puberty blockers. The vast majority of trans kids who are on puberty blockers go on to like take hormones, and the osteoporosis gets legitimately counterattacked. It increases their bone density, which is by design. That's what hormone replacement therapy was designed for in the first place. And a bunch of the other stuff like the brain swelling and all that other fucking nonsense, they're lies. They're all lies.
And talking about how much they hate their life now because they transitioned as a child and now they amputated off healthy body parts and are miserable.
Healthy body parts? Like what? What healthy body parts? What do you mean? What, you mean like top surgery? Like breast reduction surgery? You know, men get breast reduction surgery, right? Like a lot when they have I forget what disease it's called, but like not disease, like well, you know what I mean. It's a condition that that plenty of men have had before, where like they end up growing breast tissue, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. Some of them feel uncomfortable, so they get breast reduction surgery, and that's perfectly fine. Nobody has a problem with that. They're still technically healthy breasts because they're not doing anything to you. They're just balls of fat on your chest, but they just got it removed because it made them feel uncomfortable. Nothing wrong with that. Now suddenly the world is ending when a trans man wants to get breast reduction surgery. Now suddenly volcanoes are rising from the ground. And bottom surgery, kids aren't getting bottom surgery. Like the youngest I've seen was 17, and I'd be okay with a 16-year-old getting bottom surgery in like very like in very certain circumstances where like a doctor's like, "Yo, dog, nigga, this is absolutely necessary. Give this child is very uncomfortable with their genitals. This has got to happen." And more often than not, when that does happen, the trans person is perfectly fine and chilling through life. They're cruising through life, doing what they do after the bottom surgery. So this is just cope. It doesn't mean anything.
The fact that the trans movement has got people shook, has me so excited. The trans movement is not indoctrinating our youth. Our youth are understanding who they are at a younger age. And from what I was hearing over here is a lot of what y'all were saying, I wonder would you say it to the parents? Because we need to really look at what the parents of trans youth really go through. Trans youth, instead of them enjoying their life, playing with their friends, they're up in legislation trying to fight for basic rights here. 1 in 5 transgender youth have tried to commit suicide. Why are we trying to police them?
But you're bringing it only to the parents. The question was indoctrination in general. Am I correct? And then,
But they're a part of that conversation. Someone said something about drag shows coming to schools or whatnot. The kids enjoyed it. The parents just had a problem with it. But that's their issue. It's only someone dressed in drag reading a story.
Is
that could have
drag
been
not
anybody.
blackface for women?
Oh
I see
my
it as a caricature
God.
of this.
But inherently sexual.
This is so fucking retarded. If you consider that blackface, then you know what you're conceding right now? Being a woman is what fucking the patriarchy says it is. You have to fit this rigid binary. You gotta wear dresses. You have to look pretty and dainty and wear high heels and makeup and all this glitter and pink and all this fashionable stuff. That is just an innate woman characteristic. If you have XX chromosomes and vagina and boobs, you have to fit this mold. Otherwise, you're not really a woman. And if anyone decides to wear those clothing or dress like that and be all flamboyant, then they're infringing on woman culture. I've already explained that the whole, like, what it means to be a woman is different depending on cultures, and that gender identity is fluid, so. That her blackface argument has so many layers of stupidity. I don't need it's crazy. It's hard to attack it from every angle. There's a lot of her argument is like a fucking octopus demon full of tentacles. And I literally just attacked like 2 of them, but there's so many and it takes so much time. They all have 1,000 health. And I'm sitting there machine gunning like at each of these tentacles. And now I'm tired and my gun is broke. So there you go.
As
Insulting.
well.
I have to agree with you guys. I do not like the drag queen social hours. I
Social
personally,
hours.
as a trans person, didn't ever go to a drag show until I was about 40. I'm not for the sexualization of kids.
It's not sexualizing
why are we not
kids.
letting kids be kids and
Look at
bringing
this
sex
fucking
into their lives?
goddamn pick me over here, bro. Please explain to me where this sexualization of children is in regards to a man/woman wearing a poofy ass like flamboyant dress and wearing like exaggerated makeup, sitting there reading a fucking kid-friendly story to children is sexualizing them. Did I miss something? Are they having the kids on stripper poles? Are they having the kids take their clothes off in front of them? I've never seen that happen before. Hey, if you have evidence of this happening, I would love to see it. I bet like one conservative, like in the comment section, will bring up the fucking that one kid that was like on stage dressed in drag. That's like literally their only example, and I completely disavow that shit. To be honest with you, like has nothing to do with drag queen story hour though. They'll pivot off to that because it quote proves their point that the entire trans community and the drag thing is all about sexualizing kids. Meanwhile, you have one example of that kid doing drag, and then you have like fucking hordes of children in beauty pageants. I wonder if beauty pageants still go on. They probably do, unfortunately.
So early.
I think it's predatory in general to talk about sex with children.
Yeah.
Straight sex, any kind of sex.
Who's teaching sex to 3rd grade children? I really want to know.
Have you looked at the California curriculum for sex education? You need to.
Sex education.
I know that when I was
Nothing wrong with sex education for
in
kids.
preschool, I got my first crush on a boy. Because to me at the time, he was in kindergarten, he looked like Prince Eric from
Little Mermaid.
Yeah, Little Mermaid. I don't think like fucking him ever crossed my mind when I was 4, but obviously like it would have been good to know that like it's okay, like if you have these feelings for someone of the same sex.
When we think of youth in general, they're having sex at a lot.
Here's something that I need you conservatives to understand. Saying that it is okay for two little girls to call each other girlfriend and hold hands is not sexualizing kids. If you think that's the case, then don't show any Disney movie. Next time you talk about next time you fucking creeps and are sitting there okay with little Timmy engaging in lewd hand holding with little Sally, you're grooming your children. You're indoctrinating them into hypersexual straight ideology. Like, come on, guys, why do you have to do that? That's disgusting. So gross. Like, why are you gonna let your kids hold each other's hands? Ugh. God, that's fucking straights are sick. The straights need help.
Younger age, whether we like it or not. Let's just keep it 100%
You don't think it's
real.
because of that?
I do not think it's because of that. It starts at home with parents teaching their children, because one of two things is going to happen: either you teach your children or the world is going to teach your kids. That's the reality of it.
They are learning about it at younger ages from some adults or even their peers who learned about it from adults. That is, in definition, indoctrination. As a mother,
How is that
and
indoctrination?
seeing what my children are going to have to
They
be-
literally conservatives will consider like anything like you teach kids anything that they don't like, they consider that indoctrination. Even though conservatives broadly, like especially fundamentalist Christian conservatives, indoctrinate their kids into their own religious ideology all the fucking time. And God, there is some crazy brutal shit in the Bible. Like the guy who got fucking smote by God for spreading his seed on the ground. David and Bathsheba. David literally raped Bathsheba in the Bible. Like, he legitimately did that. Yeah, you have stories that have depictions of rape in the Bible. Yes, it's framed as a bad thing, but you're still showing that to kids, though. And all this barbaric killings and raiding villages, slaying all the women and children in every village you come across, like all the fucking slavery, goddamn, just so much. There's a bunch of different shit in the Bible that arguably is worse to teach kids. Like, yeah, serve this egotistical God that wants you to serve him because because he wants to get his rocks off to being served and worshipped at all times, because yeah, this almighty God definitely needs that. And this idea of going to hell for all eternity, being tormented for all of eternity, a length of time that is very difficult for me as an adult to process, which no doubt is far more difficult for a young child to process. As someone who was formerly religious, I was literally traumatized by this shit, and I still am suffering the consequences of the trauma that I faced, having been indoctrinated into that horrible ideology. It's very bad. But no, that's not indoctrination. Telling kids that gay people exist and that this is what sex looks like to kids is somehow bad. That's somehow bad. That's somehow indoctrination. Teaching kids about the realities of life is indoctrination. And I would like to know what they mean by kids when they say this stuff. Because when conservatives say kids, I know they're thinking of like by implication they mean like 10-year-olds and younger, like elementary school age. But the people that are getting taught sex ed are kids in middle school. I wasn't taught sex ed until I was in middle school. And that's not a bad thing, because I'm sorry, middle schoolers are hormonal as fuck. When I was in middle school, people were fucking like crazy. I've even seen one girl that got pregnant even. And honest to God, we would be seeing less of that if we were promoting responsible sex acts. Just how to have sex responsibly, teaching about contraceptives and all that shit. Because unfortunately, hormonal teens are gonna have sex with each other whether you want them to or not. They're just going to. And so the best case scenario is to teach them how to have it responsibly. And that's not even factoring in that the whole fucking predators thing. Good lord. At least especially younger ones, super young kids needs to at least know some, like, I mean, like, very basic sexual behavior. They need to know what that looks like, just in case some predator is gonna do those things to them. And people need to teach kids that this is what this sexual behavior is. If Uncle Tom does this to you, that is bad. But they don't want to talk about that because parents get so like uncomfortable with that shit. Somebody has to teach it to them.
Introduced to at such a young age. Like, I didn't even know what a gay person was till I was like 12. And so they're going to be having these really heavy adult conversations at a really young age just because of their exposure. And that is
what is the adult
just scary
conversation?
because I don't want to have those conversations. That's why I
What
want to be homeschooling.
what
schooling
adult
my
conversations?
Kids, because I do believe it is
What are
my
these adult
responsibility to
conversations you
protect
speak
them
of?
and shield them from the outside world, which is targeting children.
This is what, like, this is the weasel words that they engage in, like, for real though. They do this all the time. Like, they use these words like, look at all this adult conversations, sexualizing kids. Adult how? What is the adult conversation you speak of? What is this sexualizing of kids that you're talking about? Please explain this to me, because they know that if they do explain it, their argument falls apart and crumbles like a deck of cards.
Movement is really shaking the course of what people think gender identity is supposed to be.
So in one sentence, you're saying that you guys are not responsible for the indoctrination that's currently happening with
Absolutely
children.
not.
And in the second sentence, you are saying we are shook by the fact that you are responsible for
What?
it.
No, you are shook at the fact that the trans movement has become what it is.
And a movement that influences people all
powerful-
over the world, and particularly children. And we see it in the fact
Influences
that
them
the
to do
number
what?
of young
Into
people
what?
identifying as transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer is skyrocketing, which means that children are being
That's because
exposed
it's
to
become
these
more
ideas,
acceptable,
and
that's
it's
it.
certainly coming from institutions like the media, like Hollywood, like our public institutions and schools. So to say that that is not happening, or to deny that that is the reality, negates the numbers that we're seeing.
What I would say is that the idea that there is a single transgender movement and ideology is disingenuous, and that at its core, being transgender is about separating sex from sex roles and gender roles that are compulsory.
Sex and gender.
Do you think that children should be able to transition medically?
No.
The hormone
feel-
blockers, yes,
It just really
absolutely.
depends on each individual situation. They should be able to make the best medical decision for them.
I am comfortable sharing bathrooms with the other side.
Yes, I feel comfortable. Safe? That
I'm
might be a
actually
different question, but
Surprised
comfortable? Yes, I feel comfortable.
by that.
What I think the bathroom issue opens up is an issue of predatory men taking advantage of the opening. That now they could walk into a women's bathroom or a women's locker room, as we've seen happen in instances like here in Los Angeles at We Spa. And they go into a women's space, they
Statistically, trans women that walk into women's bathroom get molested far more. Like, far more. There are only, like, a couple, like, fringe instances where, like, a, quote, trans woman has sexually assaulted women in the bathroom. And one case that I'm thinking of right now has nothing to do with, like, any bathroom acceptance at all. One that I know of was the non-binary person that molested their girlfriend in the bathroom. They would have done that anyway, because the funny thing is with that story is that they consistently met in that bathroom before to have consensual sex beforehand, And then like the third time they met, she didn't want it that time, but that person being a hormonal male was very pushy and legitimately like he raped her. It was really fucked up. And then that person went on to rape another girl in a classroom even. Like that person had that whole situation had nothing to do with like allowing trans people in the bathrooms. That's an instance of a very sick-minded child that needs serious help and like needs it has a very big issue with boundaries. But broadly, trans women get raped and sexually assaulted in bathrooms more. That's just a fact. Majority of trans women, when they go to the bathroom, they just want to go in the bathroom and get out, and then that's it. Like, no, it's a fucking public bathroom. That's fucking gross. Nobody wants to have sex in it. And besides, if these hypothetical men are gonna like go into bathrooms to rape women, they're already doing something illegal anyway. Like, what's the point in identifying as a woman to go into the woman's bathroom to rape? The end result is gonna be the same. In both scenarios, that person will get arrested. Yeah. Unless conservatives think that if you're a as long as you identify as a woman and go into the woman's bathroom, you are legally inept from all rape charges.
They expose themselves to the women, and then they say, well, I'm a trans woman, and you've opened up this space for me.
But we cannot blame trans people for that. And
Nobody's blaming you.
That's the problem right here. Because again, when you walk into the bathroom, I'm not interested in knowing what you are, what you identify as. I'm trying to use the bathroom and leave out of there. What people have tried to say is that when trans women go in the bathroom, they're being predatory, and that is not the case. That is something we do not blame on trans women. Although you were not saying that, when we talk about predatory behavior and when we talk about like the predatory cases, none of them have been trans women. So I just want to make sure, I know she's not strictly doing that, but because she said that, I think it's very important that I bring that out on the table and discuss that.
We have to have the conversation, and I'll open up the question. We know that if this legislation happens, if we move forward with this move, there are going to be men who take advantage of it. Now, I want to ask you,
why
is your comfort as far as going to the bathroom more important than the female women?
Dude, if people are gonna rape, they're gonna do it elsewhere.
They will, and they
Hell,
have.
the easiest way to get away with rape is to raping somebody in the bathroom is like the stupidest way to like rape somebody. And people who rape or sexually assault know that. Like a public bathroom is really not that private. It's not as private as like all these people keep making it out to be. It's called a public bathroom for a reason. More often than not, you're gonna get away with rape in like an alleyway, like late at night, or at your own home, or a shared home, like marital rape. A fucking church, even, which is far more private than a public bathroom, in my opinion. And a lot more priests get away with doing that because they have more control over that, over their own area. And more often than not, people get raped by people they know. So of course, like more often than not, rape happens like in the bedroom, like in the bedroom, like date rape and familial rape and all that horrible shit. The bathroom is the last place you would expect like rape to happen. It does happen, but just not as often as everywhere else.
No, you're only assuming, but the reality of it is, again, when people are going into the restroom, when people are only going into the restroom, they're only focused on doing one or two things, and that's using the restroom.
Yeah.
But you didn't answer the question. Is your comfort more important than the female people who could be victimized by this?
Okay, so let me help her answer the question. Which one do you think I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me in? It wasn't the women's restroom. The issue that you're bringing up, first of all, is already violating a whole bunch of laws. Okay, if somebody's exposing themselves in a bathroom, that's a whole different environment rather than just letting trans people in. In California, it's right now 100% legal for trans people to go use the bathroom of their choice. So I don't know what law you're talking about.
You're asking this question as if I would not stand up for cis women that were in the restroom, and that's not the case. Nice dodge there. But
dodging.
the reality of it is, one thing I'm noticing is we're reducing a lot of these particular conversations to genitalia. And it's not about genitalia, it's about safety.
Yeah, her concern is the possibility of predation.
These
and
idiots
that's-
literally
that's
just
still a
think that
possibility. It doesn't matter if
women,
trans people
not
are
women,
using the restroom or not.
males just have the rape gene. If you're a perfect, purely typical biological male, like, and I mean like typically biological, like you have all the traits, all the physical traits. If you have all of those traits, then you're or if you even look like you have all of those traits, but your chromosomes don't match, yeah, well, you have a penis. You just have the rape gene. That's pretty much it.
But what you're concerned about is that you're maybe possibly that people feel more emboldened to put on women's clothes and go in the bathroom, but they're still violating the law all over the place if that's the purpose that they're going in for.
Yeah, so I didn't step forward because, and I know in today's age this is going to sound very radical, and but I don't agree with the whole transgender ideology, and so for me,
Wow,
it's
really? No
encouraging
shit.
something that is based in what I feel is delusion, and so I don't think that we should be encouraging that by allowing men into women's restrooms.
And that's based on feels. Very good.
I think that if
Trans
that's
women are
the
not men.
case,
I agree. Yeah, let's not let men into the
to some
women's
extent,
restroom.
all gender is delusion. If we're looking at historically anywhere from
Actually, like on the bathroom front, you want to know what my take on this is? Public bathrooms suck. In general, like men's bathrooms, women's bathroom, the way they're designed, they're just bad. They're garbage. I hate it. Personally, I think the best way to lay out public bathrooms, instead of having one large room with separate stalls, which is just it's just a disaster of a design. Instead of that disastrous design, it'll be a bunch of separate smaller rooms, basically a bunch of different compartments. Depending on how big the building is, you'll probably need lesser or fewer. But it'll just be a bunch of different smaller rooms, which is one little toilet and a fucking sink. And that's it. You go in, you do your business, and you walk out. And they'll all be unisex. I prefer that design. And then we can just, in that way, this whole whole trans people on bathroom conversation just won't even necessarily be an issue, because no one should be in, well, you want to have sex in those bathrooms, then have at it, I guess. But beyond that, I think that's a far better design than what we have now. And that's not even getting into the urinals. God, that is just a disgusting design.
midwives after the enclosure of the commons in the 1400s, having their whole trade
Roxana's really cute, by the way.
affected, or
I just
Brewsters
want to
having
say
their
that.
trade affected, and now we don't think of women as Brewsters, or that creating beer is a womanly thing. These all came from social conditions. These all came, a lot of gender, regardless of biological sex, it didn't naturally flow out of our genitals, and it was we're this is how my genitals are, so this is how my gender is going to be. That didn't happen. That's not like a lot of people who are either transgender or who are LGBT in general. All my friends were girls. At first, I just remember there were a lot of things where I would kind of come up against people telling me that that's wrong, that whether it's something I like, something I want to do. It wasn't until kindergarten that like someone told me that I'm a boy, and I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable going to any bathroom in this
I agree.
world,
That's it's
like in the
garbage.
current society we live in. And to make trans women the whipping girls of that, I think that's disingenuous, but I do think that we need a systemic change to make ourselves safer. I don't really know anyone who doesn't feel a little bit uncomfortable going to the bathroom.
And trans
Public
people are not
bathrooms
a
suck.
delusion. Let's make it very clear. We're here. We've been here for ages. We've been here since the beginning of time. We're in your history books. And I think
We are.
it's very disingenuous to say that a whole identity is a delusion.
I believe that you feel like women. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is an objective truth, and I don't believe in his truth, her truth, their truth, my truth. Like, there is truth, and
Who defined that truth?
like
Oof.
it's already defined. And I, as a Christian, I believe God is the one who set truth.
But who
He's
defined
God.
God.
Living in the Bible
Jesus
Belt with
Christ. Yeah, you're saying God designed that. You know what else God designed then, according to your argument? Intersex people. Goes to show that gender and sex are not as rigidly binary as you would like them to be. You just care about the status quo, and you're using God to uphold that.
religion taking center stage, it's hard for a lot of trans and non-binary folks like myself to really be able to express who they are. I had to really take on my gender dysphoria in private. I couldn't talk to my mom about it. I couldn't talk to my dad, my siblings, because ultimately I felt like it wasn't going to lead to anything because there wasn't a lot of education in the cis community like there is in the trans and non-binary community. We're talking about a book that was written by man with his own bias.
Who created chromosomes?
Yeah, I'm personally not religious and I believe in science.
Oh, you want to talk about chromosomes and the several different combinations of those we have. Ooh, you want to talk about chromosomes? Let's talk about the woman that has XY chromosomes. Oh yeah, legitimate biological women with XY chromosomes. Vagina, womb, all that stuff. But they have XY chromosomes. Who made that? Who designed those chromosomes? Did God make a mistake? Or does it not matter? Maybe your biological sex isn't a concern to God if he exists.
When we talk about chromosomes, it goes back to the conversation we were talking about earlier about being intersex.
So we're not talking about intersex. We're talking about people who were born as a male and they tried to transition. The whole fact that they're trying to transition
What does
into a
being
female
born
in the
male
first
mean?
place shows that they aren't actually that, or else there would be no need to transition, right? So you say, okay, I feel like a woman. What is that? What does that feel like?
Yeah, how does it?
And how do you
We're
know?
I'm not saying I feel like a woman. I am a woman.
So then why did you transition? Why can't you just present as a man but be a woman?
I transitioned so I could be
Listen,
who I was.
maybe she should ask her that question. Why does she choose to present the way she does? Like, she doesn't have to, like, present as feminine as she does. Like, I could tell that she shaved a lot. She makes her skin smooth. She chooses the most feminine clothing she could possibly wear. She grows her hair out even. She presents as feminine as she wants to. Why does she do that? Maybe because it makes her feel more comfortable that way. She likes it. It makes her feel good. It's the feminine thing to do. Why do trans women do that? Because it's the feminine thing to do. We feel comfortable doing that. We like it. That's it. And your like chromosomes shouldn't have to inform that at all.
I did not feel like I was the person that I identified with when I was born. So I took the steps to align my outside body with how I feel on the inside. What makes you stand up every day and make you identify as a woman? Let me challenge you on that.
I am a woman, and I don't like being called a cis woman because I'm not a cis woman. I'm a woman. I'm not a birthing person. I'm a mother.
So
Okay, then why couldn't you just be a cis woman and just not shave, not wear feminine clothing, and not grow your hair out, or you just or why couldn't you just be a cis woman and just do that since you know this is not just that, right? Since it's just purely biology, right? It's all just biology. Why don't you just accept who you are and just let yourself just be the way you were born? Don't change your body at all. Don't do with your body what you want to do with it. Just identify as a woman and just Why can't you just let your body be what it is, lady?
Mad at the terminology, not at trans.
It's your new terminology.
But this is what I notice a lot of cis women do. The terminology has been around for so long. Cis is a prefix. Cis means same. Instead of getting mad at trans and non-binary people for using updated terminology, get mad at Webster. You're not going along with the times and being educated on the different pronouns and the different identities.
You have to admit, some of the pronouns are kind of ridiculous. I mean, to be, with all due respect, I mean, I'm sure you have to agree.
Sorry, that's how linguistics works. I mean, I agree that some of the like the slew of random pronouns that come out are a little bit ridiculous in my opinion, but it doesn't make it any less valid to me. Like, even if I do consider them to be like ridiculous and out of nowhere and hard to like adapt to, it doesn't make them less valid. Because there are other languages that don't have gender pronouns. There are other languages that have like 4 like different gendered pronouns. Language and linguistics is weird. Pronouns are completely made up. They don't even matter.
Some of the pronouns
I don't think
use.
they're ridiculous. I think they're very expansive. Trans and non-binary people just want you to respect their chosen pronoun. We are not trying to force pronouns on you. Just understand that the terminology is going to continue
No
to
one's
grow.
forcing pronouns.
If you're willing to educate yourself and understand, then you've got it.
The ability to give birth is a woman's greatest strength. Can the dysphoria step forward?
I wasn't ready for that. Wow, bruh. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect that one. I wasn't ready for
I'm
that.
not able to have children, so I'm still strong. I'm
Oh, she's not able to have children. Interesting.
I'm smart and I have a lot of strength. I don't believe that having a baby is the greatest strength because not all of us can. I cannot have kids due to medical issues from a medical procedure that I had when I was younger, and it's a hard subject to talk about. It's doesn't mean I'm any less of a woman, but can we get another question? I'm sorry.
Isn't that interesting? Because most
of the
other
things that I
like
regret
conservatives
was
and
the fact-
terrorists would hinge womanhood on having babies, but since she can't, that's the one argument she's not gonna fall on. I do find that interesting. Don't you find that interesting? Like, once all of these bad faith arguments are ones that'll negatively affect them, they immediately rule that out. To me, it goes to show the level of dishonesty that conservatives have. Because she will drop every other like transphobic talking point, but that one, she's not going to hinge her ideology on that. Because it negatively affects her if she does. It's flimsy. It's very flimsy. It's a very flimsy way of looking at things. It's a very flimsy way of shaping your ideology, to be honest.
Fact that I would never be able to do that, but I was honored in the ability to participate it from the other side. Women are amazing. They don't just deal with that, so.
While giving birth is not a woman's greatest strength, I do think that only biological women are capable of going through that
Leave it
process
to this bitch to start
and
saying
bringing
some
life into
bullshit.
the world.
I need to push back on that because we're also forgetting that trans men and trans masculine people can also give birth as well. And I don't think it's fair to just set it on one group that says that just biological women have that power to just give birth. And we have to be very clear when we look at the nuances of birth.
I recognize that there are
Gender
people
and sex
who
are
have
different.
different identities. There are biological women who identify as men and then go on to give birth. I would
Yes,
argue,
gender and
however,
sex are
that those
different.
people are still biological women. And I know that is something that can offend many, but that stands as my belief.
I personally don't
correct
think
term is
there's
actually
anything wrong with
cisgendered
saying that.
woman.
But like recognizing that not biological women, like scientifically, like definitionally, they're biological females. But there's nothing wrong with saying that and acknowledging that. The problem lies in where you have to hinge your gender identity on that. And like drawing unneeded, unnecessary attention to that. That's where the issue lies with me. And for most trans activists, because we're not going to sit here and deny that that's a reality, Well, our argument is always on the fact that it doesn't matter.
Cis means same. It means that you identify with the birth that you were assigned. And so, I just really, really wish that we would kind of be a little bit more mutable to the terminology, because I think that's what really is going to open up that dialogue and that discussion.
If I may, I think the crux of the conversation kind of comes back to, are trans women women? And I think if we don't agree there, it's going to be very difficult to kind of keep the conversation going,
The
or
answer is
even
yes.
agree on the points that you guys are talking about, because if we don't believe that trans women are women, then the conversation kind of ends.
Bro, she's just trying to dodge the
terms of
question. This is
whether
Weasley.
they're like men can give birth or not, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure that's
doesn't.
the case. I feel like the ability to give birth is not like the end all be all of a woman's like meaning and life and herself and her personality. And I think that if you can acknowledge that, I would also then maybe challenge the idea that womanhood, as opposed to
Xana's
like
so
a
adorable.
female
I just want to
sex,
give her a
like,
hug.
womanhood
I just want to give her a hug.
consistent thing that has always been one way.
So how would you define womanhood?
You sound like Matt Walsh.
It's a good question.
Womanhood, to me, is about standing in integrity. It is about being confident in who you are. And me, as a Black trans woman, should not be a threat to you. And what I see from a lot of cisgender women is they're trying to deem what womanhood is supposed to look like. I have my own perspective of womanhood. We can coexist in the same world, but the reality is we get so stuck on parts. Having a vagina is not the only thing that makes you a woman. I'm sorry. It takes integrity, it takes courage, it takes lifting other women up. It takes
I don't agree
those
with that second
things
part.
to
It just
begin
takes
to define
identification.
womanhood.
That's it.
There's so many other different things.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said Blackness is about integrity and courage and kind of the same thing that you used to define womanhood, and then I said I want to transition into a Black person and I'm white.
I've already covered why
I'm
that
redefining
argument
what
is
Blackness
just
is
riddled
to
in
fit what I view it
sheer
as, right?
stupidity,
There's
so
no
whatever.
objective reality of what Blackness is. Would you consider that appropriation, or do you think that's something I should be allowed to do?
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing apples to oranges, because race and gender identity are two separate different things. Because when we look at race, we have to look at many, many different structures of what whiteness and white supremacy looks like, and how white supremacy can be manipulated into other things. And what happens is the closer you are in proximity to whiteness, you're able to weaponize it against other people. It reminds me a lot of Rachel Dolezal, who, masqueraded as a Black woman. It really did open up many more doors of conversations around it, but it's still wrong. It's still not fair, because she will still ultimately have a privilege that I, as a Black trans woman, would not begin to have.
What's interesting
It's a very weird, like, comparison to make. Because I know that those two things are, like, not even remotely the same, like, at all. But articulating that, in my opinion, is kind of, like, difficult. And I think that's, like, where bad faith conservatives have their strongest argument on this front, is because I know it's hard to articulate the difference between, like, being transracial and being, like, transgender. But, like, putting that into words is, like, very difficult, and you have to have a lot of knowledge on history and how the social constructs between gender and race differ to be able to fully understand and grasp that these two things are different, and how being transracial is invalid whereas being transgender is valid.
is that we're talking about race and gender, or as we probably like to call it on our side, sex. Race actually has a more understandable
On your
structure
side,
for people being.
everyone recognizes that biological sex is just biological sex. Our thing is we're trying to separate gender from sex, and it always has been separate. And conservatives even believe that they're separate, because a lot of the times they fall back on socialized characteristics of what men and women should be. It's not always purely biological. The arguments are always that men should be stoic, rocks, emotionless. women should be child rearers and barefoot housewives baking cakes like Princess Peach from Mario. They're all social stuff.
Transracial. Race does actually exist on a spectrum. I'm biracial. Many perceive me to be black, even though I am also half white and half black. We label people like President Obama as a black president, even though he is as well. Race has never had binary markers. It does exist on a spectrum. Gender, however, does have binary markers. As much as we try,
No, it doesn't.
as much as we
It's
change the way
bimodal.
that
Gender
we
and sex are
self-present,
both bimodal.
chromosomes are not going to change, and that's just a reality.
All right, I'm going to bring up a little point here because you talked about the binary side of gender. Well, I was born a little both. I believe I never had my chromosomes checked, but since I fathered 2 children, I'm assuming I have the correct male chromosomes. So I was intersexed, and there's a lot of reasons that happens, none of which are well studied or understood, but a friend of mine in the pediatric trauma world says about 1 in 150 kids come out with some degree of ambiguity in their gender. For me, that appeared
That's
as
a lot of kids.
Always feeling out of place. And for the first week of my life, I was in the surgical wards at, Naval Hospital in San Diego getting pieces of...
See, that's the thing. When you don't accept, like, trans people, it negatively affects intersex people as well. Because intersex people and trans people are the exceptions to this rigid rule that conservatives like to set in terms of how gender and sex ought to be. Because when you say a woman is invalid because she has a penis, then now this intersex person who was born with the penis but also, I guess, like, has a vagina, they're invalid. So, but that will also make them invalid as men too, because then they would have a vagina. So, like, what are they then? So their answer to this is forcing them to fit within this binary standard, right? And this is actually something that's happened before. Like, they would force intersex people, like, surgery, like intersex babies, they would force, like, surgeries on them that will severely damage them in the long run and have a lot of medical complications, like, as an attempt to get them to fit within this binary, like, model that they have set for how the sexes should be. It's just really bad. Like, when you choose not to accept trans people, it'll always negatively affect intersex people as well, because not accepting trans people is just, like, all about just this idea of the binary being enforced.
Cut off. So, and then they gave me testosterone for the first 11 years of my life. I wish the world were truly sexually binary. It would make it so much easier. But
I don't.
There is a little bit of a
I mean, it depends. Well, the only issue is how people treat, like, intersex people. Like, that's where the issue lies. I don't think there's necessarily wrong with being intersex. There shouldn't be. Like, it's not, like, inherently damaging. I mean, I know there are some, like, I believe that there are some intersex people that are born with, like, complications. Like, that's not always the case. Like, not really. They can still function normally, just as much as other human beings, but, like, there are some pretty sure there are some many that are even able to reproduce, so that's a different, like, thing. There's nothing, like, for the most part, there's nothing wrong with intersex people. It's just the main issue is how people treat them.
And, as a trans person, I'm a very conservative trans person.
I can tell.
I don't see the huge gender spectrum that a lot of people in the trans community do. Do I feel better having transitioned? Yes, absolutely.
If sex can be a spectrum, so can gender.
In a little shell, very large shell, but now I'm much more open about who I am. Is that the only thing that generally defines a woman? No, I don't think that is the only thing that generally defines a woman.
Right. I think there are a lot of women who may be on our side of the argument who will try to maybe invalidate your experiences by saying you can't give birth or you can't have a period. And while those things may be true, I'm sure there's a lot of other different struggles that you all are going through. And yeah, I would truly believe that you probably are highly discriminated against in our society, and it is hard to be you. It is hard to go through the things that you go through and have to deal with some of the responses that you get from people. And you know, it's not a struggle that I would wish on myself at all.
Not a struggle I wish on my worst enemy.
It shouldn't be a struggle. That's the issue. It shouldn't have to be a struggle. If people didn't like otherize like intersex and trans people, there wouldn't be an issue. There would be like no problems at all. It's always the issues that intersex and trans people face are majority external, how people treat them.
In women's sports.
I do think that
What?
trans women have every right to compete
Why
in
is she
women's
the only like
sports.
super
When trans
based
women
one?
are on hormones, the hormones break their body down. Having gender affirming surgery breaks down the body. And so I think we really need to be educated before we jump to a conclusion that trans women are stronger than cis women in sports.
Here's what you need to understand about sports, and like separating sports by gender is kind of fucking stupid because there's like so many different various body types and physical ability between among women and among men. There's so many varieties of physical ability and physical like builds of men and women, and it's complicated. It really is complicated. Like women with high level testosterone, they're like superstars, and often get mistaken for trans women, which is really fucked up in my opinion. And like being against trans women, which are the minority, and being against women with high levels of testosterone, which are also in a minority, is kind of fucking stupid. And we can talk about how we should better separate sports, because separating them by biological sex, eh, it's it's not that effective, really. It could be separated by more like actual physical attributes rather than just like the genitals you were born with. It would that would arguably be a lot better way to separate sports and shit.
Everybody.
I find it interesting that you assume the people who disagree with you are uneducated, and I will speak
You
out
are.
against that. I think the research shows that trans women do happen to have a biological advantage against biological women, even though you are taking hormones, and that does start to change your body.
Alright, before we go any further, just know that every conservative argument like against trans women competing in women's sports is always going to be misogynistic. There is all because the only way for the argument to work is if they're willing to concede that women are just inherently weaker in every conceivable way. There's no exceptions, no and if ands or buts about it. Just women are just all inherently far weaker. That's just the name of the game, and that's science. Woo. It's not always the case. Not really. There's different variations between men and women in terms of body type and physical ability, and like fucking lung capacity, bone density, all that shit. There's so many different variations. It's not simple.
And level things out. We're talking about primarily people who have transitioned post-puberty, which means they do have male bone density,
This is why
male
we support
wingspan,
puberty
male
blockers.
hand size, feet size, lung capacity. All of these things are going against women, biological women, when trans women start to enter their spaces, their sports, and compete against them. And this is really concerning for me.
I think for me, it's not a question of whether or not trans women can compete in sports. It's a question of how can we change the institution of sports in this country to make it equitable and to create more opportunity for cis women, for trans women. And like that's kind of like why I wanted to actually ask you all, like, what has your relationship to sports been?
I don't think you have to have a direct relationship to sports to realize that women are being affected by this issue. And
Yes, you do actually, because like when you do, then you will be talking out of your ass every time you tackle the subject because you don't know shit about anything in that regard. Because people just see sports from like a third person. People who aren't like active in these sports, they're always seeing it from like a third person perspective. And when they're not like actually looking at like the inner workings of how this sport works, like who are the best performers in that specific sport, it's always going to be different. It's not always just like physical ability. There's different attributes to different sports that are the highest performing. Like there are some sports where physical strength is not really necessary. Like I would say baseball is one of those sports. I would say perhaps tennis is one of those sports. I mean, it's kind of important, but not like really. And on the tennis front, Jesus Christ, like black women, Lord have mercy. Black women got discriminated, and they still do get discriminated against because like they're quote naturally more physically stronger. Like all those same arguments that they use against trans women now, and they use against black women, and still do use against black women, and even black men when they started competing in sport in white only sports. It's a very complex issue. Sports is very complicated.
And I do reject the idea of equity. There is no way to come about an equality of outcome, which is what equity is saying. There's a reason that women's sports are less funded and less watched than men's sports. It's because men seem to excel athletically and they seem to press the bounds of athleticism.
It's because
way
people just have a male
women.
bias.
We now exist on a slippery slope. If it's
I think women's
sports
and men's sports are equally as entertaining, as in none. I'm not entertained by either.
We're now seeing becoming an issue here in California, where biological male inmates are being put in female facilities because they identify as women. We have to discuss as a society how much we give into the feelings of wanting everybody to be accepted and how much we are willing to do that at the expense of biological women.
I use myself as an example. This is about how big I was in junior high school and early high school. I used to be able to walk up to a V8 engine block, pick it up off the floor, and set it on a table. And if I was in powerlifting or weightlifting, that amount of, that advantage was just unbelievable. I've been on hormones for 15 years. Did it weaken me? Absolutely. Did my bone density really hasn't changed, my muscular hasn't changed. And this is not a binary question. There's a lot of nuances involved.
I just want to ask a question. For what you were saying, can you throw out some statistics?
I don't think you need to have so there's an abundance of research. There's even trans activists who agree with exactly what I'm saying. And your hormones
not
can
really,
change, right?
only partially,
and
but not
even
entirely.
She just spoke to the fact that her bone density did not change in going on hormones and changing these things. And we can see it in sports as we're
What does
watching
bone
them.
density
Leah
have to
Thomas is
do
a great
with anything?
example.
So if you can't throw out
Like,
the
it doesn't-
statistics, we're not doing enough of the work.
If you're hinging
And
your
let's
argument
also
on
be
bone
clear-
density,
let's
your
also be
argument
clear,
is
there are
weak
some
as shit.
cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone as well. And so we really have to unpack it from all different sides here.
Can you produce statistics about the bone density of biological men and how it
Why the
changes
fuck are
upon
we
being
talking
on
about
hormones
bone
and whether
density,
or not
bruh?
it levels out to biological women?
I actually cannot, because when I would think of those statistics, I would think it was BS, to be quite honest with you, because the reality of it is we could talk about statistics and the research all day long, but it's about experience. We're going to be looking
Statistics
more at
actually
the
does
experience,
agree
because
with,
again, when we look at cisgender women
in general,
who produce high levels of
trans
testosterone
side.
and who have been kicked out of sports and been disqualified from teams based on something that they biologically cannot control, then what are we really talking about here?
Well, we're talking about, I mean, data and that is overwhelming, and we're talking about what is also we're capable of seeing with our human eyes. I think it's very clear that if you compare maybe you to the rest of us, there is going to be a strength difference. There's going to be a bone density difference.
But
Sauce,
you're
please.
just saying that you don't know until we physically do something, and just perceiving and assuming just because I look a certain way, that's not fair. Me and her we could look completely different or whatever, but she may be stronger than me.
I agree, but
she have much more agility and vitality than I do. We don't know that until you actually do it.
I'm saying
this forefront is so riddled with nuance, it's even hard to tackle the subject.
But we're only going on assumption at this point. Because again,
it's not assumption when we see it. Maybe it's the news cycle that I watch, but I see it a lot. I see it quite often where they're showing trans women beating. I mean, I'm by far.
And you don't see women dominating in the men's sports, right? You don't see trans men going into men's sport and just completely dominating and wiping the field with them. This is what happens.
I know of one example where Leah Thomas got her ass kicked by a trans man when they raced each other. So, and there probably are a bunch of trans men. The only reason you don't see it is because conservatives don't care about that. That doesn't fit the narrative of the poor, weak the poor, weak women. Our poor, fragile, weak women are being dominated in sports by these big, burly, muscular trannies. Even though trans women winning in sports, that doesn't happen very often. It really doesn't happen, and when it does, conservatives jump all over it with the quickness. And the reason why you only quantify the winners is because people only remember the winners. Nobody talks about the losers. No one does. No one cares about the losers. The winners are always talked about. Winners are always the people that people remember. But there are plenty of trans women that don't win.
When you,
plenty.
In my opinion, twist God's design, and when you go against God's design, you create these problems that you wouldn't have if you weren't going against what God intended.
I'm going to take your side a little bit on that. Let me say one more thing, and I'm supporting you on this one.
Boy,
there's a great deal of women that, and actually there was a lady in the last Olympics that they actually disqualified until she went on androgen blockers to knock her testosterone down to a female level. Like I said, this is not a binary yes or no question, and the whole idea of messing with what
trans women take estrogen, so like, what's your point?
Me up, okay, if you want to take that. And I had this conversation with a very religious man in San Diego, and he was like, "Oh, I don't quite know how to deal with that."
And God made you that way, but He didn't make a lot of the people transitioning.
I understand.
Good
God
God,
also
bro.
understands my transition. God, first of all, knew what I was going to be in my life. God already knew I was going to be trans when God put me here. So I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair when people dip and dab. Your relationship with God is personal.
Yes.
It's sacred.
Nobody really has control over their gender dysphoria, just so you know.
Relationship with God when they don't understand what they go through. God still blesses me as a trans woman. God blesses you as a cisgendered woman. God is embodied in me as a trans person. I don't think it's fair, again, when we judge people's personal relationship with God. Gender identity, sexual orientation, none of that matters to a God that loves all.
Exactly.
Gender dysphoria.
Honestly, if you want to tackle that from a religious front, it's just like, it doesn't make any sense for an omnipotent, supreme deity that is sexless, by the way. It doesn't have a biological sex, and by extension, it might as well be genderless. For that deity to care so much about us tiny little beings with, I don't understand how a god will care, how like this insanely high deity would be so concerned with who us tiny little creatures have sex with, or what identity we take on in our lives. I call me stupid, but I don't think a god is too concerned with something that insignificant in the grand scheme of things. I don't know. I think a massive deity like that would be more concerned with other things, like I don't know, Satan or something.
Is real.
I think it is obviously real because many people experience it, but like any kind of dysphoria, whether it's someone who thinks they're overweight or anything, I think it should be treated as not reality. Like if I thought I was obese, I wouldn't want to go to a affirming therapist to tell me, yes, you are obese and you should, get skinnier.
Well,
Jesus
I
Christ,
had the
I
opportunity of
love the
working on.
delusional argument so much because it's so easily debunkable because it's so fucking stupid. Because if you're gonna appeal to delusion, then you're saying that gender dysphoria doesn't exist. Because that's what gender dysphoria is. Gender dysphoria is literally just you know what parts you have, you know what you're socialized into, and you don't like it, and you want to change that. Why do you think trans women take hormones to get like all these cosmetic surgeries in the first place? Because they know what they have. They're not delusional. They change their bodies for a reason.
DSM-4, I think it was, when we actually declassified transgender dysphoria from a mental illness to a condition. You know, I had been at that point in time, I'd been cross-dressing for 50 years, and you know, and because that dysphoria was there, and every single thing I did to try to drive it away didn't work. I spent millions of dollars trying to be the coolest dude in the world. You know, I bought airplanes, I bought everything that I could to just show the world how masculine I was. It didn't work. It didn't go away. And I did therapy.
This is the story of a lot of trans women, by
purposely
the
went
way.
to a
Trying to fit
therapist
into the
that
mold
was
never works.
anti-gender affirming. And literally he said, you need to do this. You know, and because it was so deep-seated. Spent 6 weeks as Gina with my son, and at the end of that period of time, he asked two very fundamental questions. The most important one was, it's got to be truly exhausting for you to lead two lives. And I was kind of like, that kind of shook me to the core that my 22-year-old son saw that better than I did. So shortly thereafter, I announced to my family that I was going to transition. My wife and I separated because of it. The kids were not necessarily shocked, but you know, understood and have supported me quite well. And my wife has actually become a very good, you know, very warm, supporting person for me.
Gender dysphoria almost
like
made me kill myself. And coming from Mississippi, at the time, there wasn't a lot of access to gender affirming resources like hormones, if I wanted surgery, whatever the case may be. And a lot of us trans folks who don't have access like that, a lot of us have to do sex work to be able to afford some of these things as well.
This is true, and it's
Me
unfortunate.
coming up at the age of
Capitalism
20,
sucks.
and I knew I had a serious gender dysphoria, I did things to my body that I should have went to a hospital to do. That is something that's very, very hard for people to understand. A lot of us commit suicide because of gender dysphoria, and so it hits our community a lot harder.
I do think gender dysphoria is very much real. I think the issue that's happened, especially in the space of science and research, is that we've looked at gender dysphoria and said the only source of care that we can go through is blind gender affirmation care, and a lot of the research shows that this is not the route to go.
That doesn't make any
in other
sense,
countries
dude.
that have decided to do nonpartisan.
It's not blind. They actually do more processing than, in my opinion, than they should. They have to actually properly vet these kids. With just anybody, honestly. They do like have a lot of like what's the word I'm looking for? Roadblocks? That's not what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? There's a wall there. There's a Jesus, but you know what I mean. There's like a wall that keeps them from getting access. That keeps us from getting access to these things, and we have to be like processed, and they do more processing to make sure we actually have gender dysphoria before they even go through with giving kids puberty blockers, and then even further down the line getting these cosmetic surgeries and bottom surgery. Even there's a lot of therapy and processing and walls involved. This is not a blind decision that, and that does happen sometimes where like there have been like detransitioners that came out and just like they didn't do enough, like, you know, therapy sessions or like evaluation to affirm to make sure that the person was actually had gender dysphoria and that there was nothing else to what they were going through. And that does happen sometimes. It's so few and far in between. They do more processing than, in my opinion, they should. But it does happen, but like not nearly as much. So they did this. This is just a really dumb way of framing it.
Partisan research, Sweden, Finland have decided that yes, gender affirmation care should be an option, but it really should be the last resort when it comes to treating people who appear at clinics with gender dysphoria. You know, a lot of conservatives will deny and say, well, gender affirmation care does not make them happier.
You're not
and
a
in many
conservative?
cases that is true. But there are the cases like yourselves where the gender affirmation care does make them happier.
You know, I know a lot of people
The
that
majority
have transitioned, have untransitioned. I've talked with a gentleman at a religious right convention one day, and he was sitting there screaming how Jesus got him out of his gender transition. And honestly, that was the saddest man I've ever talked to in my life. When I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, here, I don't agree with what you say, but I 100% support your right to say that. And he just literally broke down crying on the steps of the Supreme Court.
If I could interject really quickly, I do.
No, absolutely not.
Damn.
I feel as though the medical profession is actually inching towards a space that is going to become unsafe for people who try to express their gender dysphoria, because now we have young children coming into clinics expressing this, who by and large, statistically, about 60 to 70% grow out of that dysphoria. But because
They
it's become
don't.
a political
If they're
issue,
confirmed to actually have gender dysphoria, then they just don't grow out of it. Like, I remember one study that was found that was like where they were just like affirming kids to have gender dysphoria that were just simply just gender non-conforming, like like a young boy that just wants to wear a dress and doesn't identify as a woman. They will label that as having as confirmed gender dysphoria, and it's a mislabeling, and that was a practice that they did before. But later on, once they did like further studies, they realized that this is a bad way of a bad method of a bad way to label that, because that's not what gender dysphoria is. It's always a self-identification. It's always a self-perception of who you are internally and how you want to be externally. It's not just little boy wants to play with dolls. It's not just that. And they would even label tomboys that way too. It's a bad way of labeling, and they realized that and they messed up, and they had to fix their whole vetting process and definitional process.
Many activists have come in and say, no, you blindly affirm, you affirm to the furthest extent that you can, rather than going through
She's
a more
talking out of her
comprehensive
ass here.
process with these children. We have a what I think is a medical tragedy happening against young people in this country.
I have been sexually harassed.
See, this is just sad.
Yeah, I think in
See, that is
our
absolutely
society,
horrible.
It's so sexualized. Everyone
And I hate to say this,
everything,
right? I really hate to say this, but this is exactly how you know that trans women are women. Like, this is a really bad, like, way to put that, but like, in a patriarchal society, just like femininity, like what we call femininity in Western society, is inherently sexual. It's not even just Western society. Just femininity in like most other culture, like most cultures today, is just inherently sexualized and considered sexual. And a lot of sexually repressed men sexually assault femme presenting people, and it's bad. And trans women get sexually harassed and molested, and cis women get sexually harassed and molested because of their, feminine features and femme presenting selves. It's gross. The hypersexualization of female bodies is just disgusting.
And I think we owe a lot of that to pornography and just media. And
It has
think
nothing to
the
do with
kind
porn.
of acceptance that I do see more so in the LGBT community of like,
And
sex
attributing
is
that to
great and let's,
LGBT.
like, everyone talk about it. and
God,
there's no
Jesus,
shame, and
dude, this is
everyone's
so
just
dishonest. It's
blurting
nothing to
out,
do with the LGBT community.
The fact that we're perpetuating a culture that's, frankly, in my opinion, disgusting.
So, are you talking specifically about LGBT people?
I'm talking more so just about this sexual revolution, that the more sexual you are,
But
the
why'd
more
you talk
partners
about
you have,
LGBT
the more
people?
open you are about your sex life and everything, the more like liberated you are. What is consent? Like people are coming out of the woodwork saying, I was violated, this happened to me, but they drove home with that person, and I'm not blaming them.
Sex positivity will reduce sexual assault. You know why sexual assault happens a lot is because this is especially on the men's on the male front. A lot of sexually repressed males suppress his sexual desires, and women, being socialized to be the quote gatekeepers of sex, gatekeep sex from these sexually repressed men, and then it causes them to act out horribly. It's like if we promote positive sexuality and responsible sex, and if we as a society just in a society where we treat sex like it's not a sacred thing, like it's just an activity, because sex is not it's not at all what people chalk it up to be. Religious people make it out to be like the most sacred, holy thing on the planet, and that causes people who don't see it as a sacred, holy thing to value it more because they never had it, and people overvalue it. People are like, oh my god, sex is the greatest thing ever. People play it up, play it up, play it up, play it up. People want it badly. They desperately need it, especially guys. Guys desperately want it and need it. Women withhold it from them. So what these men do is they act out and they sexually harass. There's a lot of them that's to them that they feel like that's their only method of having any form of sexual encounter. It's bad. It's really horrible the way we view sex. It's not. We need to have a more mellow approach on how we view sex in general. If we do, then people won't value it as much and inevitably sexually harass people. And porn is just, it doesn't, there's no data that demonstrates that porn leads people to committing sexual violence. The majority of people, especially males, watch porn, and the majority of males don't commit sexual violence.
But I am saying those lines are being blurred because of our just flagrant disregard for any kind of actual relationship prior to the sexual encounter. And I think a lot of people are being exploited left and right.
True sex positivity has been powerful. It has helped us to grow and learn about our bodies in so many ways and learn safe sex practices in so many ways. What I would blame for rape culture or for a lack of good boundaries or that kind of thing is we live in a capitalist system that has taken things like sex positivity and mangled it and repackaged it and made it a whole other thing than what it actually is.
I
Yeah,
was sexually
they promote it
harassed for
like
5
it's like
years by a woman.
the sex sells thing is
That
kind of
does
dumb in
happen.
my
'Cause
opinion.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be where men this, men that. It's hard.
Modifying sex
coming
is
from a
stupid.
man, but to me it was harder coming from a woman because it wasn't expected. Like I understand, you're going to probably touch on that about how men are more on the predatory side or the more harassing side sometimes. But I just want to let you know that it does happen with women as well.
Yeah, women do this. I actually know a woman who's been
all through my
raped
life,
by another
world's
woman.
biggest kid
It's
in
not
junior
as
high
bad.
school, I basically was harassed continuously for being gender non-conforming. Back then, everybody in junior high school took showers together. I basically had a permanent welt on my bottom from people snapping towels at me because, You know, I wasn't as well endowed as I probably should be. I had, you know, pretty good sized boy boobs and basically was just unhappy being in sports. But, you know, it happens everywhere. I have been sexually assaulted, and it didn't work out well for any of them. It's real. Let me just put it that way. It's absolutely real.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to find a person who hasn't been sexually harassed in some way, shape, or form, whether you are male or female. I think it's an experience that we all share because we are in somewhat of a hypersexualized
I've been sexually
society.
harassed
People,
before.
Love to make those comments public. I am a podcaster and I do social media for a living, so as you can imagine, the onslaught of sexual harassment is quite vast.
From a very young age, I've had this recurring nightmare of something happening to me, trying to warn people, and no one believes me. When you're not believed that you're a desirable person, and I really don't think rape has anything to do with desire, but when you're not believed in that way, when trans women are experiencing trans misogyny, we're the ones who are least believed.
I just want to give Roxana a hug, man. She's so adorable.
And it just feels so disempowering and so terrifying when you know that you are someone who is seen as hypersexual, as inherently sexual, as inherently predatory, and yet at the same time you're seen as someone who can be isolated and sexually assaulted and not believed.
That's the conservative doublespeak. It's bad.
I don't think there's anything inherently predatory about trans people, and I think oftentimes when we're talking from a conservative perspective, it gets misconstrued as viewing you as a threat, and I hope that that never comes off. And I think that allegations of sexual assault, regardless of who they're coming from, should be taken seriously.
We found common ground.
I think we agreed on something.
We found common ground.
Wow. Somewhat agreed on, except for the fucking dumb bitch in the yellow pants. She's like, I think she's the stupidest one in the room. I really hate that the black ones are like the dumbest ones in the room, to be honest. Like, God. Can we get better black people in this, man? Like, more base black people in these panels? It's so frustrating seeing dumb fuck black people representing my race. God. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I only feel this way because I'm black, but, God damn, bro. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, please feel free to like, subscribe, and all that nice, wonderful, sexy shit. But beyond that, please support me on Patreon if you feel so inclined, and yeah, fuck your mother on behalf of me and tell her it was from me, a gift from me, and yeah. Anyway, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.
I got one. You fell for the oldest trick in the book. A goddamn white woman with that flavor of love, delicious donkey booty. Goddamn it, you fell for it. You goddamn baboon booty, lip jigaboo, some bitch over there licking your goddamn chops. Think you was gonna slide in her goddamn DMs. Well, I tell you what, it ain't a white woman. It's a white man. Right here and right now in America. Goddamn it, go ahead and put that goddamn mandingo dick back in your goddamn pants. You over there rubbing his head on it, some bitch. Think you was gonna get off on one. On my white woman. My PAWG. Goddamn it, not here. Not ever. Goddamn, you already beat all the goddamn walls down to most for a white woman. The only goddamn wall you need to worry about building is the goddamn one in Mexico. Cause right here and right now, I got you. Dead to goddamn right. And I tell you what,